This is the Pro America Report with Ed Martin.
Welcome back. Ed Martin here on the Pro America Report. It was a few months ago we had Paul Seegert on with us. He is the managing partner. He's in business, PCS Advisors, health benefits consulting firm, offices all across the nation, and has commenting especially on healthcare and economics and what's happening. So there was a piece that was sent around. One of his folks sent it to me about the incredible cost of healthcare, of course, but that hospitals and the whole system is under incredible strain. And the question is, are we at a tipping point? That's one of the lines that was used in this, where we see so much medical debt. We see so many things. Incentives are off. If the money, my listeners, Paul, know I will often say follow the money is the best filter to judge. And if you follow the money with some of the incentives in place in our healthcare system, it's pretty disastrous. So first of all, welcome back, Paul. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
So broadly, going up, doesn't matter how we got here. We have Obamacare as a problem. We have the cost of Medicare as a problem. Medicaid as a problem. All these things happen over 50 decades and decades. Doesn't matter how we got here. Where are we now? If you described our system of healthcare, where are we now?
We're at a place now where when you use the word subsidy, people think I'm about to talk about the government, and I'm not. Right. The government is actually leaning on employer plans, private payers in our system to subsidize their payers. And I'll explain that. And then we're also using plan designs to shift a ton of cost to consumers and have put 100 million of them in debt in the last 12 years. But when I talk about subsidy, the whole subsidy part of this, which is, I think just about nobody knows that employer plans pay a lot more when one of their members shows up at a hospital, as an example, than Medicare or Medicaid. Hospitals lose money on Medicare and Medicaid patients, generally speaking. They need 120 to 140% of what they collect on those payers just to break even. They tolerate that because they know the employer plan client is going to show up. And Rand Corporation did a study on this, just released a couple weeks ago. The average delta there is 224%. Employer plans are paying 224% more than the government payers, and that's the only reason the system can continue. But it's actually does have an end in sight, because in 1999, 67% of us got our health care from our employer, and just in the last year, basically since COVID hit, we've gotten to a tipping point in a sense, because we're now at 49% of us getting our health care at work. So you have this dwindling supply of people, kind of sounds like an overall economics conversation, who are supposed to fund the whole system. So then naturally, they have to have inflationary increases each year because it's a dwindling pool.
Right.
All that.
So we're talking with Paul Seegert, and again, he's managing partner, PCS Advisors. He works in this field, health benefit consulting firm. Okay, now we pull back. Now drill down. We drill down and we go in there and we say, okay, who's making the system work, right? And where I come from, St. Louis, we have, Barnes, BJC Health, and, we have SLU Health Medical Center. BJC and the Washington University system in general, broadly speaking, they know how to make the system work really well for them. I mean, they're buying real estate, they're developing things. Have the hospitals figured it out? And is that the place where the system's got to change, or are the hospitals figured out because the system is broken?
Hospitals have figured it out, but some have and some haven't. It depends. If they're in a market with lots of private payers still, then they're doing well. Ironically, those markets with lots of private payers are also the place where we find the most medical debt, because those private payers, those employer plan individuals that are showing up, likely have a really high deductible. And a high max out of pocket and all of that kind of stuff. So it's kind of counterintuitive that in those markets, these hospitals might be running double the average operating margin, so maybe 12% instead of 6%. Because they still have lots of employer plans, and we're putting a bunch of people in debt. And then you look at rural markets, we're losing hospitals there. And just in 2019, or 2020 rather, we lost 19 more rural hospitals. And depending how you tally it up, let's say we have about 1,800 left in this country that serve 20% of the population or so. That's rural, and those are on the decline. We lost 136 in the last decade-ish. So they're getting hammered because almost all their payers that show up are Medicare and Medicaid or uninsured. And then you have like in your market that you just mentioned, or you go to Dallas, Fort Worth, or you go to some of these other places, those hospitals can do quite well. And they just bill the max possible for every little thing in order to get that done. They'll put people in collections. They'll take them to court. They just do whatever it takes to get the dollars in.
Again, so what's the well, let me pause. Paul Seegert is our guest. He's a managing partner, PCS Advisors, has decades of experience working in health benefits, and his PCS is a health benefits consulting firm all across the country. So what's the future? I mean, the political reality is when you describe the current system, as I always tell my wife, I was telling you off the air, who's a physician, you don't ask politicians to act against their interest. And their interest is not managing tax dollars well. Their interest is getting reelected. Now, many of them, hopefully they'll be visionaries and they'll be in the public interest, but just in general, they're going to act in ways so they're not going to upset Medicare recipients. They know they vote, right? I mean, this is the way it works. Medicaid recipients, they'll periodically upset them because by percentage, they don't vote as much. And so, but what's the vision, Paul, that could get people thinking, hey, we're going to have some market-based forces, but right now, what you're describing, and if everybody feels it, the system is broken, or maybe better said, breaking, and your description is it's racing to the bottom, and soon you're not going to have to wonder. It's just going to be totally, it's going to actually be broke, meaning the numbers won't work. Give me a vision on a way out.
Well, I agree with you. First of all, to hammer home what you just said, we're not going to get. I don't see solutions coming from the top down anytime soon.
Right?
They're going to reduce Medicare reimbursements to these hospitals another 4 points by the end of this year, which will shift more cost as they squeeze that balloon. It'll shift more cost to the dwindling supply of private payers. The real solution is that these employers are at a breaking point and they're going to demand the change. And many of them, it's a growing movement of these employers who are cleaning up their own health plan. And then that's going to lead us to a point where the whole system then has to stop and say, we've got to do things differently, because we no longer can pile on this dwindling group of employers to fund everyone's profit margin. And then when that happens, we have to really reassess this whole payment model and say, why don't we have a free market in healthcare? If you take insurance out of it and you look at healthcare procedures where there is no insurance, elective procedures, LASIK and cosmetic things,
right,
quality goes up, cost goes down consistently, because you have transparency around those things that you need, those pieces of information you need to consume well. If we don't have transparency around that, the fact that you don't know what stuff's going to cost before you consume it is pretty crazy. How do you shop? You can't. We have to make that possible.
It's and again, the forces, the small p political forces, as you say, that you get to the point where, I mean, it's a funny trick, isn't it? Your assessment would be, well, at a certain point, businesses are going to say, look, we need you to adjust this system. It's not working. Except as we race to the bottom and more people, we're down to 49% are covered by private payers. The businesses are figuring ways to get around it, right? I mean, they're either not offering services at all, or they're keeping people part-time employees. What is it that? Or
they're ditching it altogether. So we're down to 49% because we've actually taken employers to the brink where they have to say, more so on the small employer side, where they have to do the cost-benefit analysis and say, you know what, this isn't working for us, and we're actually not doing our employees a service by spending this large amount of money to provide them a very small a benefit that puts them at risk because of the huge deductibles, huge max out-of-pockets. Our people would be better off if we shut this whole thing down and let them go to the government system. So that's happening, which then makes it even worse for the larger employers that tend to be left.
Right.
But that can't go on forever.
Right. Well,
if everyone paid their fair share, we'd be at about, if everyone would pay 145% of what Medicare pays, let's say. Now, this is the very loose underwriting that I'm doing in real time.
Right.
But the whole system could work.
Yeah.
Like it should.
Well, the problem is when you describe it that way, that's counting on people acting rationally and deciding things that are in the interest of the broader community and not in their own interest or their own business's interest. Is there any possibility? Again, our guest is Paul Seegert, and he's managing partner PCS Advisors at PCS Advisors on Twitter, PCSadvisors.com on the internet on the website. Are any examples of smaller markets that experiment to try to get this under control or to try to free up competition and transparencies? Are there states, maybe even smaller states that obviously, California is its own economy. It's not particularly nimble, but are there states or municipalities that have tried to creatively do this? Probably not, because they're dominated by federal payers, right?
Yeah, there really aren't. Or not successfully.
Okay.
The bright spots in the system today are employers, top quartile employers who who take this very, very seriously and demand transparency at their plan level.
I see.
From all vendors involved. All cost drivers, and that's drugs, that's hospitals, that's surgeries, primary care, but really drugs, hospitals, and surgeries. They dig into those three areas of the plan, and they get they demand the transparency. They get the transparency, and then when they have it, and they can actually manage this thing for quality outcomes in terms of cost and health, they can drive their costs down. They can cut the cost of their health plan in half by eliminating waste. There's so much waste in our system, which is expected if you don't have transparency. I think they're the future. They're showing us the way of the future.
Yeah, you just got to get them to do it, and you got to get them strong enough that they're willing to, as you say, to band together and do it. Okay. Hey, Paul, thank you. This is very interesting. It's a great subject. I'm glad you're out making your voice and expertise known. Paul Seegert, again, is our guest. I'll put up on social media all the places where you can read more of his work. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, we'll take a break, everybody. We'll be right back. It's a tough subject. But it's got to be faced. It's a massive, massive subject, massive importance to people as well as cost. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. It's Ed Martin here on the Pro America Report. Back in a moment.